Hi, everyone. Welcome to this Canary Media live forum to help demystify home electrification. I'm Allison Takamura, staff writer at Canary Media. I author the Electrified Life column, where I get to think a lot about how we can actually kick fossil fuels out of our homes and lives. Today, we have panelists who have firsthand experience doing just that. Nika Mendoza is an experienced designer based in Richmond, Virginia. She's the proud owner of an Audi e-tron EV and rooftop solar. And as a Generation 180 ambassador, she helps others learn about electrifying their homes and vehicles. Bob Soul retired in 2022 from a 4-decade career in national security, during which he recognized the threat that climate change poses. Based in Alexandria, Virginia, he has electrified his space heating, water heating, cooking, and more. And now he volunteers with Rewiring America as an electric coach, guiding neighbors on their own home electrification journeys. D.R. Richardson, based in Boulder, Colorado, is the founder of Elephant Energy, a company on a mission to make upgrading to a climate-friendly home as easy as possible. Elephant Energy now operates in Colorado and Massachusetts. Welcome, everyone. And now we're going to go over just a few quick housekeeping notes. We'll try to get to questions toward the end. You will see in the right-hand rail, there's a Q&A module. Feel free to add your questions there at any time. And you can upvote your favorites. All right. So my first question, and this is for all of you, what motivated you to get into home electrification? DR, let's start with you, and then Nika, and then Bob.
Yeah, sure. Great question, Allison. Thanks. So I've been in climate since about 2010, and I spent about 10 years sort of investing in all sorts of different climate solutions. What I realized, though, over the course of that and trying to figure out what I wanted to do next after my investment career is there's a couple things that really, really matter from an energy transition perspective. And from my perspective, we have to do really four things, right? We have to deploy more wind and solar. We have to electrify vehicles. We have to electrify buildings, and we have to manage the volatility of wind and solar. If we do those four things, right, that's a huge portion of our carbon problem, or our carbon emissions problem. And the electrified buildings one seemed the farthest behind, seemed like it was really struggling to take off. We're making really good progress in the other three. And electrified buildings was a little slow on the uptake. So I felt like I could really help accelerate that initiative. And then having seen firsthand as a homeowner some of the challenges with doing it, it felt like, okay, here's the big opportunity to go after from a climate perspective.
Yeah, so hi, I'm Nika Mendoza, and I decided that I wanted to figure out a way to reduce my carbon footprint. And so I built my home in 2015. And then by 2017, I decided to look into solar panels to, do my part and try to have a more sustainable home. And so I installed solar panels, and it was great, because it was a way of saving money on electricity. And, it's a great perk, but it's also good knowing that I'm participating in a more renewable, sustainable future for us. And also, I wanted to think of ways further down the road, different projects or purchases that I could make to also capitalize on the electricity that my home was creating. So in 2022, I decided to buy an EV. So that way I was using the electricity that I was producing as a cost offset, but also to get another gas vehicle off the road.
Right. I'm sure that's the motivation for a lot of us too, reducing our own emissions.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, well, as Allison said in her introduction, I've been concerned about climate change from a national security point of view, really going back to the 1990s, and increasingly so every decade since then, as the problem has gotten worse and worse. But not just from that perspective, but from the perspective of my children and my children's children and the kind of planet we're going to leave them with. And then the second half of that coin is solutions. And increasingly I became aware that there is a solution, which is, of course, to electrify everything and produce our electricity in non-carbon ways. And I've seen lots of articulations of that, but the one that really resonated with me was Saul Griffith's Electrify book, where he describes a better future that we can have. And so, to me, that's the real motivation. Is we have, on the one hand, we have a choice here. We can have a really dystopian world, really, in the future, or we can have a fantastic, better future. And the choices we make in this decade, especially, are going to make a big impact on that. And as homeowners, there's a big chunk of that we have control over. Rewiring America estimates that about 40% of the emissions are related to decisions we make in our own homes. So we don't have to wait for other people to take action. We can take action in our own homes and spread the word among our neighbors. And then, as Micah said, there's sort of from a personal point of view, you kind of want to practice what you preach, right? And it's kind of nice when you electrify your home and then put solar panels on, see those utility bills get really small.
Definitely. Well, Bob, you touched on this, but DR, I wonder if you could elaborate. Can you describe the scope of how you think of the home electrification challenge?
Yeah, of course. So on the challenge side of things, the very first heat pump Elephant Energy deployed was at my home. We figured we'd find some little kernel in there that was really hard, that was really holding back electrification. And what we found is just the entire process as a homeowner was terrible. Every single thing that we wanted to do was hard, and it felt unnecessarily hard. And so the challenge really is multifaceted, complex, and pretty tricky to crack. How do you find a contractor? What equipment is going to work well for your home? How do you size that equipment? There's a bunch of different rebates and financial incentives, but does your contractor know how to stack all those rebates and incentives? Is the equipment that you're getting going to qualify for all of them? How do you have trust that this contractor is installed this equipment a bunch and really knows is going to be super competent and capable in it? Who do you call if you ever have issues with it all? So just every single piece of that decision-making process as a homeowner was hard. So in a nutshell, everything. Does that answer your question, Allison?
Yeah. I mean, I'm always curious to hear how many homes do we need to tackle, on what timeline? Like, how do experts like yourself think about the scale of the challenge too?
Sure. So, I mean, from our perspective, we're very much a don't let perfect be the enemy of the good kind of company. So a big piece of our work is working with homeowners to create this plan around what should you electrify and when. We productize that. We turn that into a tool that we have available on our website at elephantenergy.com, where any homeowner anywhere in the country can go. It's completely free. And based on the age of the assets in your home and the specific goals you might have around your home, around carbon, comfort, financial savings, and ROI, against all those criteria, what is best for you? What should you prioritize, and what action should you take when? Going back to that, don't let perfect be the enemy of the good lens. Our view is very much you should replace these appliances as they get to their end of life with the electric, much more efficient alternative. If you have the budget, go ahead and proactively replace it. But if you don't, replace it at end of life. Just make sure you have that plan to be able to replace it effectively and efficiently and affordably with the electric heat pump or more efficient version of the appliance.
Great. Yeah, great advice. Well, Nika and Bob, I wanted to turn it back to you. What have been one or two of the most challenging electrification projects that you've tackled so far? And can you describe what were the biggest lessons that you learned from them? Nika and then Bob.
I would say the solar panels initially. For one, we were the first, and I learned a lot through this process. For one, at the time when I went through with the project, we were the first in our HOA to deal with getting the authorization from HOA to install solar panels. And so that was interesting. We were ready to go for the project, and HOA kept stalling. So it was a lot of research on our own end to say, to see like, why is there a stall? We need an answer. And so it was reading the bylaws of the HOA to see
Oh
is
gosh.
there anything in there that says no, right? And then
Uh-huh.
also any laws that were in existence, for homeowners, whether you live in an HOA or not, that says no, a person can stop you from having solar panels. So it was interesting to learn that no, they couldn't stop us. So, we kind of sent an email and said, hey, we've been waiting a month to hear back. There's nothing in the guidelines, and to let them know we're going forward with this project. And then it was funny because next day later we get an email back, oh, yeah, it's okay. And so from there, it was just interesting watching neighbors around watch the whole process happen at the house. And there were a lot of questions people had. And the one question I remember people asking is, what is that going to look like? Is that going to mess the profile of the street up? And luckily, our house is south facing, so everything's on the back. You see nothing in the front. And so it worked out very well for us with the install. And I will say the company we used at the time, they provided very good service. They answered all kind of questions and made great suggestions later to come with that said company. But yeah, they made the whole experience easy, and explaining the system and how to keep track of everything on our app, and if anything were happen, and how to get service provided for panels. And yeah, it was a overall great experience. But then I learned when we did have issues with a panel, um, I had three converters go out. So always keep your paperwork, no manufacturer warranties, and also like warranties that the company may provide, because the company we use, uh, I don't know if I should say their name, but they went out of business and we were kind of left flapping in the wind. And luckily, we were able to receive the microconverters we needed, through the manufacturer. But we've been waiting forever now to have a contractor that can come out and service it for us. So learned a lot of lessons through this process, but overall, I wouldn't change it for the world, and I recommend.
Oh, that's good to hear. Even through all of that travail.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Well, I'll start off by seconding what the PR said in terms of having a plan, especially, and also making sure you do your research before something dies. I mean, you want to replace things with electric when they die, but you don't want to be figuring that out when it dies, because you don't want to figure out how to replace your heater in the winter or your hot water heater in the middle of a shower. So and do your research. In terms of my own personal experience, I got to talk about heat pumps because, of course, they are one of the most impactful things we can do to cut emissions. They're one of the modern movers of electrification, along with solar panels and lithium-ion batteries. And also to tell a couple of stories. First, the heat pump water heater, and then the heat pump HVAC system. So in terms of the water heater, that was the first thing I took on, and water heating is the second biggest energy use in your house. So it's an impactful thing to do to cut your emissions and your energy costs. And I had only recently actually learned about heat pump water heaters. Most people probably don't know they're a thing out there in the general population. And I went to Home Depot and found out about them, and it sounded good. And they gave me an estimate, and I went to my own plumber to get a second estimate. And he told me, "Oh, you'll be very unhappy with that. You'll run out of you want gas. You'll run out of hot water." And I said to him, I said, "Well, thanks, but I'm committed to electrification." So I kind of took a leap of faith there. And of course, it's been great ever since. We've never run out of hot water, and the thing is great. But you sometimes will get people telling you things that aren't quite right, just because of their own experiences. In terms of my HVAC heat pump, which we did later in the year, those are more complicated, and the house has to be designed appropriately. The first person I had come to my contractor I had come to my house told me that it would freeze up at 32 degrees if I didn't have gas backup. And I knew enough at that point to know that's not quite right. So as soon as I told him that I was committed to electrification, he couldn't wait to get out of the house. But what I found in talking to a number of different contractors is you get the truth when you talk to a number of people, and you kind of know who knows what they're talking about and who you can trust. And again, it's worked out great. But I guess I go back to a point that DR made about don't let the perfect be the end of the good, because there's lots of great projects out there. Don't anguish over it too much. There are solutions. There are lots of good heat pumps. Just move on, and you'll probably be happy. It is important that they be right sized, that they have the right kind of heat pump for the climate you're in. But if you deal with a reputable HVAC contractor, there are lots of good solutions out there, your home will be better for it after you electrify.
Well, to follow up there, Bob, how did you go about finding trusted, credible contractors?
That is, and I'll say, I wish there were more companies like DR's around, because what we really need out there is companies that kind of take the whole home approach, an integrated whole home approach, from the beginning of an energy audit and looking at your electrical service and picking the right electrical machines for your. It would be great if there were more companies out there like that, but in a lot of places there aren't. So you kind of have to work with what is out there. There are a lot of great contractors out there, and we need those contractors to do this work. And they are hardworking people. They're great. We need them, and most of them are very reputable and reliable and honest. And if you, like I said, if you talk, so the first thing I would say is talk to a handful or so. I like to talk about what they do, so you learn a lot, and you can get a feel for who's, kind of high quality and reputable. And then, of course, you can check rating sites and things like that, just like anything else. And the last thing you can do is go to groups that are, in this space, whether it be Rewiring America. We're starting to collect information in the electric coach course on good contractors from the coaches in that. Other climate organizations like Citizens Climate Lobby, which I'm also involved with, has chapters all over the country. Most of those people have electrified their homes. So you can get sort of word of mouth of who's good and pass that. I think one of the things we should do as successful electrifiers is spread the word about not only that our house is well, but hey, here's a good contractor, and let's steer people to contractors who will do a good job and who are committed to electrification.
Mm-hmm.
Allison, I'd like to piggyback off of what Bob just said. I will say, after participating and becoming an ambassador, that's how I was able, to find a solution for the problem that we have with not having a contractor to come out, to fix our panels. So yeah, participation is, I would say, one of the biggest things that anyone that's looking to be sustainable and to have a more efficient home or lifestyle, participation is key, because information oftentimes it's fragmented and you have to do so much digging. But when you're with a group or a community, it does help the journey along. So I just wanted to say that.
Right.
One of the things you find after you've done your own house is that your friends and neighbors and colleagues at work start to ask you about it. And so you can spread the word about good contractors, just word of mouth as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, DR, do you have anything to add there? And maybe just like speaking to the pain points that customers experience and how your company, Elephant Energy, and other whole home electrification companies try to address those.
Yeah, no, I agree with everything that's been said so far. I think a couple other sources for finding vetted contractors that we've come across. Sometimes your city, county, or utility will have lists of companies that have installed heat pumps or heat pump water heaters. So that can always be a good place to look. As Bob said, try to find a neighbor or somebody in your community who's done it and try to get that word of mouth recommendation. And then, if you don't know anybody and there's no local list, just asking people if asking a contractor if they've installed this type of technology and how many projects, and have they done cold climate ones? Have they done the specific heat pump water heater that you're looking for? Lots of contractors in our experience will say, yeah, we do heat pumps, and then they come out to your house and say, oh, no, you can't do a heat pump. You have to do a gas furnace. So really spending the time up front before you waste your time, really vetting those contractors and asking to make sure that they've installed lots of this equipment in the past. But this is the problem that we're trying to solve, and others like us. That's the most common thing that we hear is from our customers. Oh, hey, you're the third company we've talked to. The first two said we can't do a heat pump. We're like, cool. Well, they're wrong, unfortunately. So happy to help, but we need millions more elephants out there.
I'll mention one other, Allison, which is the first step that I always recommend, and I'll be interested in DR's view on this, is a home energy audit, and find out what your heating and cooling loads are to try to weatherize the house so you can reduce those as much as possible, which helps to right size the heat pump. But they also, those good ones, they also know about local rebates from your utility or other local ones, and they may also have good recommendations on contractors. So good energy auditor can be another resource.
I know the company we use to install our solar panels, they provided all of that. They actually came in and they added more insulation. They did testing to make sure, to see how efficient our home was. Changed out all of our lights to LED, and then we ended up changing our irrigation system to be more efficient. So we have an electric system for that. And also, they did all these things. So, it's a shame when you do have like a company that provides like all those things, right? And so maybe DR can speak more how how that happens, or what Elephant is going to do or can do, or won't do, to help their clients maintain, and that way when the experience is good, people see what your experience is, right? And so if you have a great experience, then that helps influence them into taking the leap as well. So I know your company is on that track, and if you could speak more to that, that would be great to hear.
Yeah, of course. So look, I think one of the big challenges in the space is anytime you want to do something, you have to go find a different partner to help you with it.
Mm-hmm.
You want an energy audit, you got to call one person. If you want a heat pump, you got to call a different person. If you want a heat pump water heater, it's a different person. EV charger, it's a fourth or fifth person. And that sucks as a homeowner. That just makes it hard. So I love energy audits. I think it's an amazing physical exam, for lack of a better analogy, on the spot for your home. It's a comprehensive diagnostic. Do you need an energy audit to be able to get a heat pump or a heat pump water heater? No, but it gives you a really good set of data, and oftentimes utilities substantially subsidize it, either completely or mostly. So it's a really good, great way. It's a great way to take stock of what you have in your home. And what Elephant is trying to solve is that multiple set of contractor problems, right? Because to the conversation already, if you have to go find a reputable contractor to do a heat pump water heater, but then it's a completely separate sleuthing exercise to go find a heat pump installer, and then separate to go find an energy auditor. Again, that's demotivating as a homeowner. That's really taking adding friction to the process and adding headaches, and just reducing the likelihood that people will take action. So the opportunity that we see, and I think lots of others see it too, and I'm excited about it, is how do you create just a one-stop shop, a really simple pathway for homeowners to start with that energy audit, or start with an analysis of wherever they want to start, and then be their partner for future upgrades down the road. So I think the siloed way of that the trades have historically operated in, where somebody does plumbing, somebody else does electrical, that I think made sense for 100 years. But as we think about the infrastructure in the home and wanting to make that home systematically more climate friendly, it's starting to make sense to bring all those trades under one house, or at least have one sort of clearinghouse, one clearing mechanism to be able to find surface and get all that work done.
I will say until elephant is in all of our communities, another way to spread that pain that DR talked about is, again, go back to the plan. It's usually going to be a multi-year plan.
Yeah.
So you can spread that pain out. It doesn't have to be all in 1 year. So you can do the heat pump, water heater in 1 year and the HVAC 2 years later, whatever, and spread that pain out a little bit, as well as the expenses, of course.
Mm-hmm.
And that's another way to deal with that problem. One of the first things I would say you ought to do, though, is have an electrician look at your electrical service to make sure that you have all the electrical wiring that you're going to need down the line for the various electric devices you might install, because you don't want to do that piecemeal.
Right, and having a plan ahead of time can help you even avoid an electrical service upgrade, which can cost thousands of dollars. Even more reason to have a plan. Well, I want to see that theme of costs. DR, well, just to set the context, the upfront costs for electric upgrades like heat pump HVAC systems, heat pump water heaters, heat pump clothes dryers, induction stoves, and EVs, they're often more expensive than the fossil fuel alternatives, though local and federal incentives can help bring those costs down. DR, how do you help customers of different income levels figure out how to afford home electrification projects?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So for us, I think there's 3 different pieces to it. The first is collecting a couple different quotes. If you go to get a heat pump, you can often find that the price can vary by 50 to 100% between different contractors. That sucks. That's really hard to navigate as a homeowner. Don't take the first bid that you get. So getting that price transparency from the industry, I think, is really important to ensure that you are going to get something that's affordable. Second thing is, as you mentioned, Allison, there's lots of financial incentives, federal, state, utility, local. It's pretty hard to keep up and keep track of all the different incentives. If you're a local HVAC installer, you might have really dialed in the incentives in Denver, but just south in Colorado Springs, the incentives might be completely different. And then just north in Boulder, they're going to be completely different. And Fort Collins, they're completely different from that. So it's really hard as a contractor to know all that. But therefore, you have to find a contractor who knows those incentives and rebates and who can stack all those rebates and incentives to make it work for you. Because often, if you can stack all those incentives and rebates, it's going to be substantially lower cost than the gas alternative. Not always, but in many regions of the country, it's increasingly lower cost to replace an old gas system with a new electric one versus a new gas one. And then the third thing is financing. So there's lots of different ways to get creative around financing. Many states are starting to have green banks. So where we operate is in Colorado and Massachusetts. Colorado, there's the Colorado Green Bank that provides pretty low cost financing. Massachusetts, there's an amazing program through Mass Save that provides 0% heat loans. So these things can really help make the upfront cost of them substantially more affordable, especially when you're comparing it to replacing an existing system with a gas-powered one.
Yeah, excellent points. I want to just remind the audience that you are welcome to add your questions, and we'll be getting to those toward the end. So make sure you do that if you do have a question.
If I can give a couple of numbers to reinforce what DR just said, you will get wildly different estimates from different contractors, and the high ones do not necessarily correspond to the high quality. In my own case, in my HVAC heat pump system, I had estimates under 20,000 and over 30,000, and the under 20 were the best ones. Heat pumps, water heaters. I have friends who are telling me they're getting quotes of $7,000 or $8,000 to install a heat pump water heater. You do not need to spend that much. Absolutely not. Electrical work. I have a friend who's getting his panel upgraded, even though I tell him he doesn't need to. He could actually get by with 150 amps, but he wants to anyway. He got a $13,000 estimate and a $5,000 estimate. The
Oh my
$5,000 estimate was from an electrician I recommended to him that does very good work. So you can really, definitely talk to multiple contractors. The costs vary a lot, as well as the other incentives that DR mentioned.
And Vaughn, oh, sorry, Nika, did you have to
Well,
add?
I'm going to say there's also the SREC that people can, which is the Solar Renewable Energy Certificate. So, like, you can get, you know, some return on investment by selling your excess energy into certain markets. Like when we first entered the market, Pennsylvania was the only place we could sell to because Maryland and DC were a closed market and Virginia didn't have a market. And then finally, Virginia has a market. So, the little, $300 in a year, is $300, right? So that's more than you had, and it's a nice little return on the system that you put in your house. So when people know about, all the incentives, other programs, to help offset the cost, it makes things a lot smoother and more enticing for people to want to, enter the market. So that's also a thing that people could look into as well.
Mm. Yeah, well, for both you, Nika, and Bob, could you share a little bit more about how you decided that the high upfront cost or the higher upfront cost was worth it, and if there were particular incentives you used?
Well, yeah. So the first thing is to do it when the thing's got to be replaced anyway, or hopefully just before it breaks, and that's a little guesswork. So we had in our case, we had a 19-year-old gas water heater. Served us well, but 19 years is pushing it. So we got ahead of that one. In that particular case, the cost of the heat pump water heater was with the 30% tax credit from the IRA was less than what a high efficiency gas water heater would have been. Because I got a quote on that from the same contractor. Mm. So as DR said, it doesn't have to be more expensive. In the case of our HVAC system, I again asked our contractor, the combination of a new gas furnace and a new air conditioner would have been more than the heat pump. So it's not necessarily true that it's more expensive. And then of course you get the tax credit from the IRA. Now some things are more expensive. Like right now, this is changing, but right now induction ranges are more expensive than their counterparts. But they are so much better, it's worth it. And I'll give you another example of where it's worth it. It's a small example, but where the light went off for me was my beloved electric lawnmower, which I got in 2016, I guess it was, still going strong. That costs more than a gas lawnmower, but it is so much better. I mean, I don't have to, ruin my hearing. I don't have to breathe those fumes. I don't have to annoy my neighbors. I don't have to change the oil. I don't have to go to the gas station with that little gas can. It folds up in the garage because it doesn't have any fluids. You couldn't give me a gas lawnmower. So in those cases, the premium is definitely worth it. And of course, I don't have to buy gasoline and change the oil as well. So a lot of things are actually getting cheaper than their fossil fuel counterparts. But even the ones that still are more expensive are always way better.
Yeah, like even with the EV, with the car, right? You don't pay for gas. And also like $14 is what I calculate now just to, if I were to fill the tank, as a lack of better words, for my car, if I was to charge it every day, which I don't. So I only charge my car up to 70%, to keep the battery life, to prolong the battery life. And also, if I need to go long range, then, I plug up at home and charge, so I can do that. But also employers are starting to put, EV charging stations at work. So that's a cost that you can offset, and just doing your due diligence with these things. Buying a vehicle is not it's a loss anyway when you drive a vehicle off the lot, right? But over a long period of time, with the EV, I don't have oil changes. I don't have spark plugs. There's all these things, all these components that you worry about with your ICE vehicle that you just don't worry about. And so that costs over time. The cost savings has been great. And so, yeah, going this route has really been like a positive. And so hopefully, like when I talk to people or when people ask questions, it influences them to do their own research. And there's a range for everyone, right? There's something out there for everyone. You can start off small or big. And also to go back to always have a plan for the big projects as well. I know when I built my house, I got solar panels 2 years later. And, had I been forecasting the way I did when I got the system that I put in my house, got the largest system that I could, that they allowed, because I knew down the road there were projects or things that I would want to buy that would offset for. So always plan, planning. So yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. Getting a big enough solar system so that you can power your whole home on electricity, like that takes forethought.
Yeah.
Right.
I'll mention another one of the, we talked about the IRA savings from the Inflation Reduction Act, which is the tax credits and the state administered rebates. But there's also a lot of local incentives, including utility incentives. So I've just recently actually been looking up water heaters, and Dominion, the energy where I live, has a $400 rebate on a heat pump water heater if you're replacing an old-fashioned electric water heater. So there's lots of money out there if you know where to look to reduce the upfront cost of some of these electric systems.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and DR, would you say that contractors are the best resource for people to go to find out what those rebates are, or would you recommend others?
No. I mean, to Bob's point, right? If you switch utilities, if you switch cities, if your neighbors, just across a county line, the rebates and incentives could be completely different. And I just think it's really hard for contractors to know and stay on top of all that information. So I think contractors, we're asking a lot of contractors right now to be that front line of knowing and managing to rebates. And I just think that's slightly unfair. Unfortunately, there aren't great resources to figure out what are all the rebates that you can stack. Rewiring America is starting to have some pretty good resources that's pretty well updated based on the city, state, et cetera, that you're in. But it's a huge gap in the market, Allison. And we're asking contractors to do a lot, and we're asking homeowners to do a lot to go vet and verify that the contractor has found all the rebates and that they're not missing anything. So I would love to see more solutions out there. There are a couple software companies out there that are starting to tackle this problem. There's a company called Rock Rabbit and another one called Eli that are both trying to create APIs and a software solution for these rebates, because it's a problem and a challenge.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
As DR says, I know Rewiring America is creating a database that not only the IRA incentives, but also these other local ones. But until that's out there, it's another place where people who have electrified can help spread the word to your neighbors and friends, just like good contractors. When I did my home energy audit and follow-up weatherization, there were some nice utility rebates that the auditor knew about. So I can now tell my neighbors if they want to, weatherize their homes, which were built at the same time as mine, there's some great rebates to help cut the upfront costs. So you can spread the word that way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, great point. Well, just going back to the networks and peers, Nika and Bob, you're both helping others make their own clean energy transitions. What have people been most curious to know about?
Oh, off the bat, the first thing people always want to know about is cost, right? What's the cost? Also, incentives. People always ask about different various incentives. I know, like, one thing, my car always, makes people ask questions. And I'm like, particularly for my model vehicle, there was no incentives for it because it's not a domestic vehicle. But um, just look out. I just tell people, just look and see what vehicles are out there in the range and the price point you want. And there's the rebates, incentives. Um, and also, I know people always ask like how much energy when they do know I have solar panels. They want to ask how much energy is produced. What is your electric bill? And I love telling them my electric bill usually, in the spring, summer, and early falls, just $8. And they look at me like, what? I'm like, yeah. So, um, so that, those things, just those are the primary questions I know that are asked the most when people talk to me. So I'm not sure what people may ask Bob, but
Well, I would definitely include those for sure that you just listed. I would add to that a really big one is where do I start? People just don't. It's kind of overwhelming. Where do I start? So what I tell people on that is an energy audit is usually a good place to start. It's kind of a no risk, high payoff, low cost way to start. You get a lot of information out of it. But the other place to start is just to sort of use some of these planning tools, like for example, they're on Rewiring America's website, and kind of take stock of your house, and particularly look at how old are things. So, like I said, in my case, my water heater was the obvious first target because of its age. So those are a couple of ways people can kind of look at the question of how to start, and that's often a big one. Another big one that we haven't talked as much about is that I hear a lot is for older homes is the electrical service. If you have a 200 amp service, you're good for electrification. You can do it for sure with less than that, but if it's less than 100 or 100, it's harder. You can do it, but it's harder. And so people ask a lot about and the wiring they may need for a new, whether it be an induction range or another new electric machine in their house. So there's a lot of issues associated with electrical service. I guess the third one I would add is that this is one that was one of mine actually before I put in my heat pump, was about cold weather performance for heat pumps. Because in the past, I had one in the 1980s in my first condo, and I did freeze to death when it got really cold. It definitely did not work well in extreme cold weather. And that's a lot of people's impression of heat pumps, which is way out of date with what's happened. The modern heat pumps are a wonder, and they are so much better. And you have ones that work in extremely low temperatures or being deployed in huge numbers up in New England. But a lot of people are worried about that. And so that's another common question is, will this thing work when it gets really cold? And there are definitely good answers to that, both with the type of heat pump selection, as well as other ways to supplement a heat pump with supplemental heat sources. So those are probably three that I hear a lot.
Oh, and I have one more. People do ask me, what's the furthest trip I've driven in my vehicle? They always, and the furthest I've gone is 637 miles. And they ask me, how the heck did you do that? Where did you go? And how, and so walking people through, planning a road trip in an EV, because you just don't jump in the car and just go. You do have to put a little more thought in it, but there's so many apps out there. And then a lot of cars have their own app integrations and things of that nature that make finding charging stations easier, and alternate routes than routes that you normally might take, to get to where you're going. But the first time there was a couple hiccups, I zigged when I should have zagged, but I never ran out of energy. I never ran out of electricity. But just walking people through a long road trip. So, because that road anxiety, range anxiety, so just getting people over that hump, and letting them know, hey, you can go pretty far in the vehicles, and maybe just add, from Virginia to Indiana in an ICE car, I can get there in 10 hours. In my EV, it was 12. So not too bad, right? So
comparable.
Yeah. So just explaining those things and just experiences have made people a little more interested into jumping in market. And I find it funny because when I put panels on my house, back in 2017, it was like, oh, what are you doing? And fast forward last year, like all of a sudden, 3 houses across the street all got solar panels. So, it's
Maybe that 30% tax credit.
right. So, it takes people a minute to plan or get situated or decide what they want to do or if they want the buy-in to this lifestyle. But, you know, anytime anyone has questions, I'm more than willing to answer those. Or if I don't have an answer, I will, I will say, hey, well, there's this group or this person I know that knows this information. So, yeah.
I'll just add a point about charging because we have a couple of EVs, and one of the best pieces of news over the last several months on electric vehicle charging is almost all of the automakers are now going to the so-called North American Charging Standard, which is what basically the Tesla system. And I will tell you, the Tesla supercharger, whatever else you think about Tesla, their supercharger network is superb, both in its geographic coverage and its reliability and its quality. After I retired, we took a 6-month, 27,000-mile trip in our EV to all the national parks in the lower 48 states, to some of the most remote places in America. And we could get everywhere in that EV because of the supercharger network. And having that available now to essentially all cars and EVs in North America will be a huge step forward in terms of eliminating this issue of road trips.
Yeah.
And also more and more hotels and other places like that will have level 2 chargers, so you can charge overnight in addition to the charging over highways and so forth. So you can leave in the morning just like you do at home with a full tank, quote unquote.
Mm-hmm. Right. Well, I wanted to get to audience questions. It's been a great conversation so far. One is, how can utility companies prompt customers to electrify? Some are doing quite a lot, others are not yet.
Did you say utilities, Allison?
Utility companies, yeah. And maybe DR, do you want to start addressing this question?
Yeah, look, I think utilities are in this fascinating place where a fully electrified home without solar often has double the kilowatt hour usage of a home that has not yet been electrified, that's still using gas for a lot of its appliances. So from a purely financial incentive, utilities should be wanting to electrify. Utilities are also a funny risk-averse entity where too little load growth and they're scared, and too much load growth and they're scared, and there's just this Goldilocks zone, and electrification, because of what it implies, is a little scary for them. So they should be very financially motivated to do it. Some of them are in Massachusetts, as an example. They're doing a really good job incentivizing the electrification through the Mass Save program. And what I think is key there is having a strong regulator, the Public Utilities Commission. They're often the ones who are helping utilities see the light around electrification, as it were, and encouraging and setting up the right systems and policies. So what I've seen in my career is that the PUC is the best position typically to encourage utilities to proactively electrify.
Oh, if I can jump in, that is one of the most important points here. We've talked about obstacles to electrification, and ironically, the utilities are one of them. They should be all over this as growth in their business. Any number of estimates have been done of how much more electricity we're going to need in a fully electrified economy. Almost every study I've seen says ×3. Maybe a little less if we're very efficient, but something like ×3. The utilities have not gotten that memo, apparently, and they really need to get going. We don't have a lot of time to both retire the older fossil fuel plants and grow. So they are a huge issue here. I'll give you another example. I mentioned before the Dominion Energy rebate for a heat pump water heater. Well, they only give that if you're converting an electric water heater rather than a gas water heater. So shouldn't they want you to convert from gas to electric? But they just want to minimize their need to add more generation capacity. That's the old mindset that they're in. So that really needs to change in order for this whole electrification transition to happen.
Mm-hmm. Is there a way to think about the estimated cost per square foot to totally electrify a home? No. Yeah.
No. Unfortunately, it's
No.
really hard. It just depends. Some homes might have two furnaces and two air conditioners, and the same size home might only have one, and that's going to double the cost. So or 50% to 100% of the cost. So it really just depends on the unique systems around your home, how insulated it is, how what type of equipment you need. A home with ductwork is going to be a totally different cost than a home that needs mini splits. So unfortunately, there's no good rules of thumb.
And do you take mass transit or do you drive an EV? And there's lots of variables there.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, someone is asking about building a home since they don't have past utility bills to provide solar installers with for a proper array sizing. They're asking whether it's better to wait for some time before they're installed or go ahead.
If I could have done it again, I would have loved to have done it as my house was being built. So I could think about how I wanted things wired. And I say that because when I built my house, I had the house wired for a generator. But when panels needed to be installed, so thinking about future projects such as possibly battery backup, how do all those things work, right? And I think if everything would have just been done from the beginning, it would be much neater, and more to spec that you how you want it. But I would say if you're building a home and you wait within the first 5 years, I would get something done, just because you want that return on investment. Also, like as far as your warranty on your roof, like those things. So if you're installing a new roof and you're getting the panels, then no problem. But if you're coming to the end of the lifespan of that roof, you could see that, okay, now I have to replace the roof, and now I have to, then I want panels. So I just think on like the cost that you want to come out of pocket at the beginning, and also whatever your plan is, what you're building your house to, what you're planning to do with your house, with the systems needed. Because if you have a hot tub,
Nigel, it's a little hard for me to parse what you're saying. Could you say that again?
What I said was, it depends on what you're forecasting for your home, and the electricity use that you're going to have. I would say I did it 2 years after, but if I could, I would do it upfront, just so you can do it for your home.
So you can do it right for your home?
Right. So that way it's a more seamless build, if you get what I.
Right. Yeah.
There's the other factor is financing that DR mentioned earlier, which is often an obstacle. Is if I were building a new home, I would put in geothermal and solar panels and roll it into the mortgage. In terms of financing.
Heat pump system?
Right. So you don't have to pay the upfront cost. It's just rolled into the mortgage, and it would pay itself off in terms of essentially no utility bills. The other thing is that you really, if you're not going to install them, you should at least design the house and the wiring with that in mind. Because in my case, for example, the house was not built with this in mind. So the electrical service panel is over on one side of the basement, the utility room is over on the other side of the basement, and so you have to run wiring back and forth between the electrical panel and where the control systems go for solar, or where a battery system for solar goes. So you really want to design it at least with that in mind.
And also, if you're going to have EVs, you can also have your house already wired for your cars in the garage, or wherever you want that charging port to be. So luckily, without knowing I was going to buy an EV, we just put an extra, 240 plug in the garage, and then it just so happens to be in the right spot, for when I pull in, I just plug in. So if you're going to do it from ground up, I say do it right as soon as possible. So then that way everything's to spec the way you want it, and things are situated the way you want it, and it makes it just a better experience.
Mhm. HVAC contractors seem to be one of the biggest barriers to electrification, and they are the front lines of who speak to homeowners wanting to make a change. How do we get them on board?
Well, we talked earlier about that, and find the good ones, and then promote them, talk them up to others. And what I do with the ones I work with is I tell them, hey, look, this is the way the world. This is the way the world is going to go here. This is good business for you to get into this. So that you can at least do that.
Or
Mhm.
you can also too, when you're building a home, talk to the builder and see like what their view on electrification is. Like, does their company, how many jobs have they done, from the ground up, and making a person have a house that is energy efficient in that nature. And if they're not willing to do it, ask the question, well, hey, I have a contractor that is well versed in this, and they know how to do the system. Can we put them on the build? Just you just have to advocate for what you want
Mhm.
and try to make it happen that way. Because yeah, unfortunately, you'll either have builders, or it's just going to be a mixed match of all the things, right? And so if you can, just try to be proactive and find the person that can give you exactly what you need in that moment.
Mhm.
Hmm.
Let me double check the time. Okay, I think we're coming up on time. So I wanted to pose one last question to the panel as a parting shot. Could you all share in a minute or less a hard-won piece of advice with us? Uh, Bob, then Micah, then DR.
Well, I guess from my own experience and working with others is the biggest lesson I would say is this is readily doable. The home electric there's a lot of things that are hard about electrification, like building, making steel and long range airplanes, but home electrification is the low hanging fruit of electrification. There's absolutely solutions out there, so don't worry so much about this being too hard or not possible. As DR said at the beginning, don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. There are lots of good solutions out there. Heat pumps work fine in cold weather. Heat pump water heaters provide plenty of hot water. Find a good reputable contractor and just do it. And don't worry too much about these problems that you hear about.
Hmm. Micah.
Yeah, I would have to say biggest lesson learned. Ask a lot of questions, do your research, and also start small, and everything snowballs after that. You'll just start finding other ways to electrify your home, your lifestyle, and then at the end of the day, you'll find out, oh wow, I've done this much in this amount of time, and you'll see those cost savings. You'll see the return on investment, but you'll also feel good that you're trying to help the greater good and push everyone towards a cleaner future. So that's what I have to say about what I've learned going through this journey.
Mhm. Well, thank you.
We
DR.
got two quick thoughts. One is don't underestimate the comfort benefits that electric technology has. It's one of the most common themes we hear from a customer is, you said this would be more comfortable, and I didn't really believe you. And then I got the heat pump installed, and it's way better. So that's been pretty cool to hear from customers. The second thing is, we talked about this a lot, but it's just so important to have a plan. Unfortunately, at the state of the industry that we're in, it just takes time to get electric technology. So if you have a water heater fail, it's pretty unlikely that you can get a heat pump water heater the next day, but it's pretty likely that you can get a gas water heater. And so the challenge that we have, right, is in working with homeowners to say, I want to get a heat pump water heater, but I can't possibly have cold showers for a week. I get it. I wouldn't want cold showers for a week either. That would be miserable. So you have to have a plan. You have to be ready to pull the trigger. And as Bob said, wait till it's at end of life, but don't wait till it's Christmas Eve when your in-laws are in town for the water heater to fail. Do it slightly before then.
Mhm. Well, thank you. Great advice, all. And yeah, it's been such a pleasure to get to talk with you and hear about your personal experiences. I know we weren't able to get to all of the audience questions today, but we'll be looking at them to address in our future reporting. Thank you again to our panelists, Monica Mendoza, Bob Zoll, and D.R. Richardson. I deeply appreciate your time, and I appreciate all of you in the audience for joining us. I do want to mention quickly that Canary Media is a nonprofit news outlet powered by donors who enable us to make our content free for all. If you like what we do, we invite you to become a donor. Help us bring you the stories that you need to make this energy transition happen in your home and beyond. Have a great rest of your day, all.
Thanks, Allison.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.